What's up guys, Saf here on Super Saf TV and welcome to another Super Saf style camera comparison. The much awaited one between the Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus and the iPhone XS Max. You guys know the drill by now. We're going to be checking out all aspects of the cameras. Front, rear facing, images, video, low light, audio, all of that stuff. Check out the audio icon. We're currently using the front facing camera at 1080p from both devices. And we're going to test out the stabilization. So just going to walk for a bit. Okay, now let's run. Right, so now we have switched to 4K video recording on the S10 Plus from the front-facing camera. So we've got 1080p scaled up and 4K on the S10 Plus. Now, I don't believe we've got stabilization at 4K, which is why I started with 1080p, but we will take a bit of a walk. Doesn't seem to be too bad. Right, we've just moved on to the rear-facing cameras on both devices, recording at 4K 30 frames a second. We're going to test out the stabilization. So let's go down this way. Start off with a walk now. Let's go ahead and run. There's a new feature on the S10 called Super Steady, and that's supposed to give you some really good stabilization on your footage. But I only realized that it goes back down to 1080p when you switch this feature on. So we are now at 1080p on both devices to make it fair. And let's go ahead and test out stabilization. Let me know what you think. Just testing out the autofocus. Firstly on the XS Max. Super fast. Same test on the S10 Plus. Once again, super fast. So that was the video. Now before we move on to images, let's have a quick look at what we're working with. For the front-facing cameras, the S10 Plus does have a high resolution and a wider aperture, but it also has a secondary front-facing camera, which is going to be used for depth information. For the rear-facing cameras, the iPhone XS Max has 2 and the S10 Plus has 3. The iPhone XS Max has a regular as well as a telephoto camera. The S10 Plus has those, but it also has an ultra-wide. And you'll see the use cases of this later on in this video. And all images that you will see have been shot on automatic. I haven't tweaked any settings, and that's to keep things as fair as possible. Let's get straight to it. So starting off with some selfies, I think both are doing a really good job here. Great dynamic range on both. The S10 seems a tad brighter. And another thing that you have on the S10 is a wide-angle selfie mode. Now, it's not actually using separate lenses as far as I'm aware. It's possibly using software. And this allows you to get in much more into your shot. So if you want to take some group selfies and things, then this is definitely going to be useful. Now, I wanted to test out the dynamic range from the front-facing cameras. So I went in front of some bright light. And here you'll see that although the iPhone is a tad brighter in the foreground, it has blown out those clouds in the background. Whereas the S10 Plus has a more balanced shot, and I do prefer the S10 image here. Now, testing out some selfie portraits, of course, these are very popular. And here, I like both. Both are doing a really good job. They're not perfect in terms of edge detection. On the iPhone, my hair is a little bit blurred, and on the S10 Plus, my ear is a little bit blurred. And the S10 has also blown out some of the highlights near my cheek. So overall, I do prefer the iPhone image here. Now, doing another test with portrait mode, I prefer the image from the S10 Plus here. Edge detection is definitely a lot better. On the iPhone XS Max, my hair is blurred and my ear is also blurred. This is not the case on the S10 Plus. The S10 Plus, a little bit brighter here, but it's not blowing anything out, so I don't mind that. Now moving on to some low light selfies, here's where I go outside and take selfies in complete darkness and look like an absolute weirdo, all in the name of camera comparisons. And here the S10 Plus is producing a much brighter image, and that is thanks to the wider f1.9 aperture. And if you use the front-facing flash, the S10, once again, a little bit of a brighter image, and it's also a tad sharper. So I would say that in low light selfies, the S10 Plus does get the win here. Now moving on to some outdoor shots. So using the primary camera, both doing a good job here, a little bit more contrast on the S10 Plus. And the shadows have a little bit more detail on the iPhone XS Max. That's something that it definitely does tend to do. Pulls out details on those shadows thanks to Smart HDR. But overall, I like both images. I think it's going to come down to personal preference. Now, if we use the telephoto cameras on both so we can get optical zoom, both doing a really good job here. I like both images, very useful to have. Now, here's a perfect situation where you can use that ultra wide. So here's the normal shot and boom, here it is with the ultra wide. Just check that out. Look how much more you can get into your shot with that ultra wide camera. I absolutely love ultra wide cameras and this image really goes to show why. Now I wanted to test out the dynamic range on both cameras, so I shot directly into the sunlight, and here both are doing a really good job, but the iPhone once again is pulling out more details in those shadows. Now this might look a little bit unrealistic to some people, so I do think it's going to come down to personal preference, but if you are talking dynamic range solely, then the iPhone does get the edge here. And here's another situation where the ultra wide makes sense, and boom, look at that. Look how much more you're getting into that shot, all from standing in the same place. Now going into a close-up, so this was in harsh sunlight, both doing a good job here once again. The S10 looks a little sharper, but I do prefer the colors. They're a little bit more balanced on the iPhone XS Max. I think it's going to come down to personal preference. Now moving on to portrait mode, this was actually quite tricky because on the S10 Plus, it now takes portrait mode shots from the primary camera, which is a wide angle, not the telephoto camera like it used to on previous Galaxy devices. And the iPhone still uses that telephoto camera for your portraits. So both of these images were taken from the exact same point, but there's a massive difference in the angle of view. You can pretty much see all of me from the S10 Plus, whereas you are zoomed in on the iPhone XS Max. Now the angle of view for portraits is going to come down to personal preference. I personally do prefer a telephoto camera for portraits. Most photographers will shoot portraits around 50 mm or above. But I've spoken to so many people who like a wider angle camera for portraits, so it's going to come down to your personal preference. Both are doing really good overall in terms of edge detection. Now, just to kind of put them a little bit more side to side, I got my brother who was taking these shots to move closer. And here you can see that they're a little bit more matched, although of course the angle of view is different, so I may look a little bit stretched on the sides on the S10 Plus. But I do like the edge detection better here on the S10 Plus. If you look at the area that's in between my arm, that has better blur, whereas it is struggling a little bit on the iPhone XS Max. Now here's another portrait shot. Once again, did get my brother to move in closer to kind of achieve that similarity. Both doing a good job. The iPhone is struggling a little bit on the edges on the side of my face, but generally speaking, both are doing a good job. I do prefer the colors on the iPhone, however, compared to those of the S10 Plus. And we have another one here. I do prefer the edge detection on the iPhone because if you look towards my ears, then the S10 Plus is kind of getting a bit confused with the house in the background. And I do prefer the colors here more on the iPhone XS Max. And final portrait mode shot. This is in harsh sunlight. Edge detection I would give to the S10 Plus. Once again, if you look at the area between my arm, it has picked that up, whereas the iPhone XS Max hasn't. But I do prefer the colors once again on the iPhone XS Max. Now moving on to some low light shots. So this first shot, outdoors at night, both seem to be doing a pretty good job overall. I'd say that the S10 Plus is a tad brighter. And trying out another shot, once again, I do think the S10 Plus is brighter. And if you go in 200%, you can really notice that brightness difference. This seems to be thanks to that super wide f1.5 aperture. And just to take things really extreme, I went indoors in low lights, so complete darkness. And here you can definitely see that the S10 Plus, because of that super wide f1.5 aperture, is getting in much more light compared to the iPhone XS Max. Right, so there was a lot to cover. Now, in terms of my end thoughts and conclusions, I'd say for the front-facing camera, when it comes to images, I would have to give the overall edge to the S10 Plus. Not only do you have a wide option for your group selfies, you have overall better dynamic range, and you also have better performance in low light. But when it came to videos from the front-facing cameras, it was a little bit tricky because I did prefer the colors on the iPhone, but the S10 was a lot sharper, especially when you were shooting at 4K UHD. So I think that's going to come down to your personal preference. What do you prefer, a sharper image or do you prefer better colors? Now, images from the rear-facing cameras, I think both did really well. I think you get slightly better dynamic range on the iPhone, but on the S10 Plus, you do get that ultra wide, which gives you so many possibilities. The S10 also performs better in low light overall, and that is thanks to that super wide f1.5 aperture. For portraits, I'd say it's a bit of a draw. I did prefer the edge detection overall on the S10 Plus, but I prefer the colors on the iPhone XS Max. And in terms of the angle of view, whether you like telephoto or a wide angle for portraits, that's going to come down to your personal preference. I do like a telephoto more. Now for video, things were interesting. I do think the S10 Plus was a tad sharper and it was also more stable, but dynamic range by default was better on the iPhone XS Max. Now, hold on. I know fanboys are going to be going crazy in the comments. The S10 Plus can film with HDR10 Plus. Now the problem with that is you can only view that on an HDR10 Plus display, and everything else shot in this video was not at HDR10 Plus, so I couldn't really show it in this video, but that option is there for you. And for audio, both devices record great quality audio. We've got stereo recording on both, and they both sounded really good to me. That's what I think anyway. What do you guys think? Definitely drop me a comment below and let me know your thoughts. If you want to see lots of images from lots of different devices, then be sure to give me a follow on Instagram. I'm at SuperSaf, and I do post regularly on there. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you did, a thumbs up would be appreciated. These camera comparisons take forever to do. And if you haven't already and you want to see more videos like this, then be sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching. This is Saf on SuperSaf TV, and I'll see you next time.